Hey, it's Lisa and welcome back. If you've got your Bibles, grab them. We're going to be in Proverbs 7 today. And this goes along with a sermon I heard years ago by Pastor Andy Stanley called The Principle of the Path. And the principle of the path is that your direction, not your intention, determines your destination. So you can intend to go to, say, the Florida beaches, but if you are driving on I-85 in Atlanta north I-85, you're not going to end up where you intend. So intention doesn't have anything to do with it. It's where you actually are physically going on that path in life. And so in Proverbs 7, there's a story about a young, naive, or simple, some of the translations use interchangeable words, young boy who's walking down a street into the web, I call it, of a crafty prostitute. Now, the story is narrated in Proverbs 7 by someone looking out a window. He's watching the scene unfold. And think about in life, if you ever watched somebody making decisions, living life, you're kind of going, oh, that's not a good decision, or he shouldn't have done that, or she shouldn't have taken that job, or he shouldn't be with that girl. You kind of see it. They don't see it, but you see it. And so here's the story from this narrator's perspective. In Proverbs 7, starting in verse 6, it says, "At the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice." If anybody knows what lattice is, it's like that wood that crisscrosses. And it says, "I saw among the simple," meaning naive, "I noticed among the young men a youth who had no sense." How many in our youth, we had no sense, right? In verse 8, "He was going down the street near her corner." This is the prostitute. "Walking along in the direction of her house at twilight as the day was fading, as the dark of night set in." How many of us, maybe when we were growing up, we had rules as far as a curfew? We had to be home because our parents knew. My dad always said, nothing happens good after midnight. But you can see in this story kind of what's about to happen, don't you? Even before I read the next line. And so if there was music, I could cue the music, that the boy is just like, this happy, don't worry, be happy music playing. But to the narrator who's watching him walk right into the web of the prostitute, the narrator might hear the theme from Jaws. Do you remember that old movie from like the 70s? And as the shark was circling, it would go, dun-na, 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 bum, 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 bum. You remember? If you were old enough to remember that movie, oh man, that gave me nightmares. So anyhow, we're going to continue here in verse 10. "Then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. She is unruly and defiant. Her feet never stay at home." She's always walking the street. "Now in the street, now in the squares, at every corner, she lurks. She took hold of him and kissed him with a brazen face. She said, 'Today I filled my vow, and I have food from my fellowship offering at home.'" Oh man, she's working it. So she pulls him and he's thinking, wow, I'm like one in a million. And the narrator's thinking, no, you're one of a million, idiot, you dummy. And so she's trying to sell him that, she's kissing him, that she fulfilled her vows, meaning she's a good girl. She's been to the temple. She's done her offering, she's done her fellowship offering. And she says, "So I came out to meet you. Like, you're so special. I looked for you and I have found you." That's verse 15. "I have covered my bed with colored linens from Egypt." I never thought about that till I read this verse. Have you ever gone to the store and bought sheets for your bed and they had it labeled as Egyptian cotton? I mean, back then, only the rich people could afford those kind of linens. So she's selling that she's rich and he would want to be with her. In verse 17, "I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon." So back in the Bible times, people were kind of stinky. There's no air conditioning. I doubt there was deodorant. They walked along unpaved, dusty roads, and there was horse dung, cow dung, whatever from the animals that were walking. And they wore sandals most of the time. So that's why usually they would take off their shoes and have their feet washed as they would enter a house or a building. But so she's setting this whole thing up, this environment of, I've got these Egyptian linens, I've got perfumed, I mean, it's gonna smell good. Don't you want to come into my web? And then she says in verse 18, come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. The Bible's better than a soap opera, I tell you. You have to read it. You gotta pick up God's word and read it. It says, let's enjoy ourselves with love. This isn't love. This is physical attraction. This is not love. In verse 19, my husband is not home. He has gone on a long journey, meaning we're not going to get caught, so it's okay, right? He took his purse filled with money and will not be home till full moon. So I guess if you've got a purse full of money, then you've got a lot of shopping and errands to do, and he's long gone and is on foot. It's going to take him a long time to come back. So verse 21, with persuasive words, she led him astray. How many of us have been led astray by persuasive words by somebody who didn't have our best intention, who was crafty like this prostitute? I'm sure we probably can all identify. We've been in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person, and we put ourselves in a position to be lured in by sweet talk, and somebody didn't have our best intention at heart, and the next thing you know, boom, we're sunk. And so she says in verse 21, with persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. Verse 22, all at once, he followed her. See, just boom, guard goes down and she's got him. Like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose. Yep. Verse 23, till an arrow pierces his liver like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. Now, I do jail ministry, and a lot of the women have to pay the consequences for being lured into situations where someone didn't have their best interest at heart. And in a moment, like an ox going to the slaughter, they were brought to their death. And some are in jail for a short period of time, and others go into prison for many, many years. And so the proverb ends in verse 24, where the narrator pulls out of kind of looking through that window and addresses these young men. And he says, now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention, okay, to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her paths, meaning sin. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. And so I love Solomon's wise words in Proverbs. There's so many great sayings if we would just read them and implement them and not just go, okay, close the book. That's really nice. She does everything from setting the scene with the linens and the perfume to, I'll take care of, I know it's on your mind that you're worried about my husband coming back, but if no one catches us, then we can sin and it's not wrong. She's selling that. Go ahead and sin as long as you're not caught. But you see, the God who loves us, who created us, he sees everything and he knows everything. And there's nothing that we can hide from him. And our sin is ultimately against him. It's his commands that he sets to give us a happy and joyous life, abundant filled life, but only if we are following his direction, because then our destination will be where we intended. And so the listener might say to Solomon, oh, Solomon, it's just one night. You're making a big deal out of nothing. But it is a big deal, because God knows that every decision that we make about our direction will ultimately either lead to a blessed destination or not. And so this boy, the narrator's like, you're not one in a million. You are one of a million. And I think about counselors that we go to when we have problems. We're so predictable. They've probably heard the same story over and over. Our direction has a destination tied to it. And the minute we start telling the counselor about some of the choices that we made or people that we hang out with or what we've done, it's pretty obvious. We need a U-turn. When you change direction, then things will change. And I think that's what counselors try to do. They help try to guide us back in the opposite direction. And so your story is kind of predictable. And maybe it didn't take a counselor to see that. Maybe you've got people in your life that are saying, I've watched you and I've tried to give you advice. I've tried to tell you not to hang around this person. I've tried to tell you not to go into that neighborhood. I've tried to tell you not to speed or to take a different job or to go back to school and get an education. Whatever it is that someone's trying to tell you, to stop drinking so much, to stop doing drugs or smoking, it's bad for your health. A lot of times we don't want to listen to the wisely advice that someone gives us. We just want to, put our fingers in our ears and go la 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 la, and we don't want to hear it. But it's probably predictable to someone who's tried to point it out to you. They can see, you can't see what they do because you don't want to. And, maybe somebody's written you a note or just sat you down, but you resist. But you don't want to be a victim of this disconnect between your intention and your direction, because your direction, not your intention, is going to end up ultimately at your destination. And so Andy Stanley talked about getting 2 boxes as a homework assignment. And he said, in one box, collect all the fun you've had and all the money that you've wasted on that fun, and just sit at that box and stare at it. He said, and then go get another box, a box of memories where you have poured into somebody else, where think about your most generous moment, he said, where maybe you had to use some time that you didn't really have, but you did anyways to help someone, change a tire, or sit with someone in grief. Maybe you lent some money that you could have spent on movie night, but you knew that somebody else needed it more, and you generously gave it to them. Think of that moment. And then he says, fill up that second box with all of those memories. And he says, and then ask yourself this question: what do you want more of? Memories of fun and money that you wasted with nothing to show for it, maybe except debt, or memories that elicit emotions of feeling good, of doing for others and investing in others. And so he said, fun is always in the rearview mirror, but satisfaction is our traveling companion. So when you get to the destination that you intended, you'll be satisfied, right? If you intend to get out of debt and you took all those steps and you get to that destination, you're out of debt. It's like, wow, this is great. I'm satisfied. When you spend the time and energy in your kids instead of working all the time or having fun, and your kids turn out to be healthy, wise, independent individuals, you will be satisfied that the direction that you took in raising your kids got you to that destination. And so you just have to look at what is it that you want, and are you willing to make a U-turn? Are you willing to change directions to get there? Paul learned the secret to being content in every circumstance, finding satisfaction. And that's the invitation of your Father, to live in a different direction. In Matthew 11:28, it says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke, and you will find rest and satisfaction for your souls. Follow me, and I will lead you to abundant life. Follow me. That's the invitation of Jesus. Follow me. But what do? We follow ourselves. We follow others. And then we wonder why we get down the path and we're not where we wanted to be. And so in this verse in Matthew 11:28, when it talks about take my yoke, I asked some of the ladies at the jail the other day if they knew what a yoke was. And some people were thinking it was like an egg yolk, Y-O-L-K. But in the scripture, it's talking about yoke as in Y-O-K-E. So I have a picture. And this is a yoke. It is a wooden device that linked 2 animals together. And it would ease the work of hauling the load. And so I love that that picture, that imagery of the yoke, because when Jesus says, take my yoke upon you, it means that we should be bound together with him, because back in the days of the animals using these devices, they would take the more experienced animal and put an inexperienced animal with it. And the more experienced older one would kind of shoulder most of the burden of the weight and teach the younger one. And that's what Jesus does when we yoke ourselves with him. When we're going through trials, he's carrying the weight of our load. He's making our burden light. He's showing us the way. And so it's just beautiful. To be yoked to Jesus is just a beautiful thing. And it's, some people say, well, I don't want to have to do the hard things of being a Christian and following God in the 10 Commandments. But he says, take my yoke. My burden is light. Like, it's not going to be like you think it is. He also tells us not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And so like this naive boy in the Proverbs and this prostitute, he's yoking himself for a moment with someone he shouldn't be. And it always leads to destruction. And so let's consider Jesus's words. So these 2 oxen are sharing this yoke, and it very much resembles discipleship, that Jesus invites us to learn from him, which is another way of stating, be my disciple. And so we don't have to figure these things out on our own. Jesus declares his yoke is easy. It doesn't imply simple, but good. So if we're yoked to Jesus, there's peace in being yoked to someone good and loving and patient. And so I hope that you will ponder and go back and reread this story in Proverbs 7 and think about those times where you have placed yourself in a situation where your direction is not leading you to the destination that you want. And maybe today is the day that God is poking you, gently prodding you to make a U-turn. U-turns don't happen fast. It took you maybe a long time to get to the point where you're at in life today. So it's going to take time to make that U-turn. I think about a sailboat, if you've ever sailed, where you're moving the sail back and forth, and you've got the little rudder, and you've got to catch the wind and the water just right, and it slowly turns that sailboat around. So if you are not heading in the direction you want in any area of your life, begin the U-turn today. Yoke yourself with Jesus. Let him carry the load, teach you, and lead you. And you will be blessed for it, and you will be better off for it. So I hope that you have a great day. Share this with your friends, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.